If penises grew on trees, would anybody need men?
Very good morning and welcome to Ribbonsome. Rather interesting.
But also not so much.
This is Paolo,
And this is Ale.
and today we're going to talk about penis-wielding nuns. Is that right?
Yes. Throughout the years, in my researches, and because I am very interested in this topic, I have found a series of medieval images, and not only medieval images, of phallic trees.
Here's an image. This is the first one.
Yes.
Well, you decide. Is this a phallic-ridden tree? Is this a penis tree?
I think we cannot argue. This is in fact a penis tree, and some scholars and scholarly persons have actually studied this.
What's the difference between a scholar and a scholarly person?
Well, I think we are scholarly persons.
Okay.
Not necessarily scholars as of yet, but I feel quite scholarly.
So a scholar basically is not a person.
That's another level that we have to strive to achieve.
Okay,
I know
understand.
I've been a scholarly person throughout this whole week because I've been looking continuously at
Penises.
icons and pictures of penises. On a regular basis, it is referred to as a phallic tree.
Okay.
A tree of phalluses. I'm gonna give you a little bit of context. Okay, so we are in the Middle Ages, but we also are, yes, we are in the Middle Ages.
Right now, or
Yes, because starting from the Middle Ages and all through up to the 16th century, we find evidence in manuscripts.
trees.
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Not only penises, but also
also
vulvas.
phalluses. Oh, also
Vulvas.
vulvas.
Yes.
You mean the Swedish car?
Volvos.
Are we
Volvo
talking-
trees.
Are we talking about female genitalia? Human genitalia all over the place.
Human genitalia.
Trees, bushes,
everywhere.
in the garden.
Loved by everyone.
Okay, it just grows.
It grows everywhere.
So when you say, well, vulvas don't grow on trees, that's
Well, they do.
not a fact.
They'll do, but they grow on a lesser scale than penises do.
On a lesser scale.
Yes, they are smaller and they are fewer.
It's well endowed phalluses, whereas
The vulvas are harder to get.
are harder to get.
I've never been one of those people that can, wink and not look like crap. You know?
Not look like a vulva growing on a
A
tree.
vulva, half a vulva. So, we're talking about men that are afraid of women and feminine sexuality and their own sexual prowess. Throughout the Middle Ages, we find manuscripts, murals, and we find wood carvings and badges, pilgrimage badges. Depending on their sex, they would wear a vulva badge or a penis badge.
Now that's something interesting. That's something that I can see coming back in fashion.
We should-
like a penis-shaped badge.
When
or
we
a
start
vulva
making
badge.
memorabilia for Ribbonsome, that's gonna be our first product.
A penis and vulva badge.
You heard it first. Anyway, we find these images throughout the Middle Ages. For example, The Romance of the Rose, Le Roman de la Rose, a famous romantic novel about a chevalier that was trying to conquer a woman sexually as well, and everything, all the poems and the romanticism and everything that he does to be able to get this forbidden fruit. And in one of the editions made in 1370, and that is present in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, if anybody wants to go and see it, a woman that had a workshop with her husband, Jeanne de Montbaston, was the responsible artist and illustrator of 3 or 4 pages in which there were nuns having sex with monks in very cheeky positions, as
Nuns
one would.
having sex with priests,
With-
always very cheeky.
Yes. And not only, they were picking ripe phalluses off of trees and sneaking them under their dresses, as well as in baskets.
As
of
one
course. As one would, because
If
it is
one
more,
were-
it's more easier to carry. It's more practical. That's where I keep my books when I go to school.
I was going to say that I find that it's always easier to carry inside of my clothing than outside.
I would hope so.
Also more ethical.
And thank you for that. Another piece of evidence that was actually found recently, very recently.
Emphasis on peace.
Piece, or morceau, as you would say in French.
As the French have it.
As the French have it.
Also,
In 2000, in Massa Marittima, Tuscany, Italy, archaeologists found what used to be a public fountain with the depiction that you're probably looking at right now down below of an enormous
emphasis on down below.
of an enormous phallic tree with, as we said before, ripe, flourishing erect peni with 8 women underneath that were picking them. There were 2 that were fighting over one particularly large one, and another one that was trying to get one down the branches with a stick.
By beating it down with a stick.
Beating it down with a stick. They literally said, all of which were disproportionately large and clearly in an aroused state. Beside them is another woman who appears to be mostly uninvolved, but who, upon closer inspection, has one of the fruits of the tree protruding from her bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. Now all of this, to me, is very clearly designed by men.
of course. And I will tell you why. Because, apart the fact that in medieval times, women didn't have a very good reputation, you know, as the original sinners and, you know, witchcraft and everything. Specifically, we can connect this type of iconography to a book that was published in the end of the 1400s, around 1470s, by 2 Dominican friars. And this book is also known as one of the most dangerous books in all time.
Okay.
It's the Malleus Maleficarum, which means, well, it's something like the hammer of the wicked.
We.
We.
The hammer of the wicked. Yes.
Yes.
I believe it is the hammer.
The hammer of the wicked.
The hammer of evil, or the hammer of the wicked.
Yes. The scholarly persons that are in charge of studying these images have argued that it's probably the earliest depiction in art of women acting as witches. And why would you say there is this connection? Because, and I looked up a bit of the text from the Malleus Maleficarum.
She did her homework.
Yes, and what they actually talked about is how women would steal the sexual organs of men and keep them as their pets.
As they do. As they do.
As you would, because it only makes sense. One of the excerpts that I found was, what shall we think about these witches who somehow take members in large numbers, 20 or 30, because you wouldn't take any less than that.
Or any more.
Or any more.
30 is a nice number.
Yes, you know.
It's like the Trinity times 10.
Exactly. And it shows temperance because, you know, you gotta control yourself
like,
even if you're a witch.
I'll steal 30 penises, but not one more. That shows I am not a glutton.
Well, apparently the penises are a bit gluttonous because they would be shut up in birds' nests or in some boxes where they would move about like living members, eating oats or other feed.
As all living members, male genitalia do.
We see it all the time. We see it all the time.
I think these people who wrote this would be very interesting at a cocktail party.
Names exactly.
Cocktail party.
One of them was called Kramer. Cocktail. It took me a bit, but I got there. So anyway, another thing that was written on this, Kramer, one of the guys that wrote this book, goes on to describe...
Is the other one called Kramer?
No, the other is called something like Gessler or something like that.
Do they write their names like with a
Kramer
VS in the middle?
Kramer. So anyway, he goes on to describe one man's quest to restore his missing member because a witch
I like this one.
had everated him. Does that word exist in English?
Emasculated.
Yes.
You're only talking about penises here, but from the pictures, I think we're talking about penises and their accompanying...
testiculi.
Yes.
Yes, I like where you're going. So, this guy, poor castrated fellow, approached a certain witch who instructed him to climb a particular tree where there was a nest containing many members and allowed him to take one that he liked. He was unfortunately rebuffed after trying to pick up...
There are many men who would rather like to be able to pick their own.
I think you have to find the right place, talk to the right people. I mean, nowadays, anything is possible, you know?
He could choose whichever penis he liked.
Yes, but apparently no, he could not, because he was unfortunately rebuffed after trying to pick a particularly large one because it belonged to a parish priest. So we did full circle. We went back to the monk and the nun doing all their chimichangas.
Their chimichangas.
Chimichangas.
Which is
That's
a scholarly person way of saying
sexual intercourse.
Sexual intercourse. So now you're talking about witches, but we were talking about the fact that saying witches or saying nuns isn't that much different because the fact is that they are women, and that is the essential point.
The essential point is that we are all women, no matter what we are.
We are all women.
We are all women. And therefore, we will always be lustful, witchcrafty penis stealers.
Women will always take the brunt of history and religion, and all of this was clearly, except for the penis tree drawn by Jean de Maupassant. Everything else was basically written by men.
Yes.
So it's clear why it's always been women who take the brunt
the oppression.
I find it interesting that you talked about vulvas being on trees as well. Is this the same witches or the same nuns that put vulvas on trees, or are we talking now about men stealing vulvae?
That I do not know, because there is a wood engraving in a museum in a German city that I will not attempt to pronounce, where there is a woman picking penises off of trees, and normally there should be another part where there is a man who's picking joyfully vulvas off of another tree.
Okay.
This second wood carving I could not find, but lots of places refer to it, so I have no idea.
Okay.
I do not know.
But what we can assume is that although perhaps the focus was on penises on trees and women stealing penises, because it was men especially who wrote about this.
I like to make a count of how many times we said penis in this show.
But what's interesting is that also, it's basically an issue of human sexuality, this, and the oppression thereof.
Well, listen, I also found that as a response to this precise book, Le Roman de la Rose, Christine de Pizan wrote a book, so a woman in the late 1400s, a woman in the late 1400s, early 1500s, wrote a book in response to this book, complaining that it was misogynist. So even by the standards of those days, I mean, it's evidently something about female sexuality that cannot be accepted by the masculine world.
Well, it's something that happens to this day.
So history is true to the ages.
History is true to the ages, and the phalluses and the vulvae.
I thought you were going to say, and the phalluses are true to the vulvae.
Are true to the vulvae. Now, what I want to know is, while the women hid the phalluses under their dresses,
yes,
did the men use the vulvae as those sparkling little, what do you call them? The ones that say
be strong.
Be strong, and all the colorful ones that you get.
I'm worried that that's the first thing you came up with.
Because where else would you put them? They didn't have pockets.
Well, maybe that's where they got their what was it called? The pins.
Oh, the badge.
The badges.
Yeah, the badge. Okay.
I mean, like what's it called? Saint James of Compostela, Santiago de Compostela. What is it that a pilgrim takes with him when he goes on that pilgrimage?
A
conch,
seashell.
which in Spanish is jargon for
the vulva. Actually,
look
the
up
vagina.
Concha. The vagina.
Is it the vagina or is it the vulva?
I never understood the difference between the two. That's your homework for tonight.
That's your homework for tonight.
So, talking about the difficult position that women are in historically, okay? Why nuns?
Why nuns?
Why nuns?
Is that a special term?
He had asked me
why
do they have to be nuns? Why are they almost always nuns picking these phalluses off trees? Mm-hmm. Historically, nuns, most of them did not choose a convent life. They were sent there by their families or because they were widowed, they didn't want to get married again.
Into nundom.
They were forced into nundom and into not having sex and repressing their sexuality. It is a problem with nuns and monks that their repressed sexuality is not necessarily their choice. I found a really
I want to talk
cool,
about that engraving.
This engraving, which you're probably
right
looking at right now. I'm gonna try to say it, but I'm gonna butcher it. Fleisch macht Fleisch.
Fleisch macht Fleisch.
Which may be translated as meat equals meat. And what you can see is a nun trying to bribe a cat that has a turgid penis in his mouth.
I like the adjective you've chosen.
Turgid. That's the one I wanted to use before for the trees, but I couldn't remember it. So, and she's trying to bribe him with a fish as she's holding a rosary. And if you can tell, if you pay attention, that is not a cross. That is another.
It's a crotch.
It's a crotch. That is another exponent of the phallic family. And what they say this proverb might want to say is that a nun desires a penis as much as a cat wants a fish. So
that could be argued, I mean.
And that's the reason that normally we see these miniatures and illustrations and drawings and frescoes of nuns picking penises off trees.
Now I find the jokerish
Have I answered your question?
Individual popping out of the window with what
I want to know what he's holding.
It's either a mask, one of those pollution masks, or it's a very small
No, what
apron.
were those things called? The vaginal wigs. What were they called?
I think that's for another episode.
Oh, that was...
that is fodder for another episode.
Vaginal wig. A merkin.
The merkin. Yeah.
I think that could be a merkin.
If you want to know more about merkins,
we know a lot of useless
or merkinate, we do know a lot. That's why we do this show.
Yes.
Because we do know a lot of rather interesting, but also not so much. Emphasis on the also not so much.
If you want to know more about merkins, comment below,
or merkinai.
and we will look that up for you for the next time.
Yes. I believe there is a lot we still need to cover and talk about this subject and all other subjects that have sort of sprung from it. Okay?
No pun intended.
But we will cut it off right now in order not to tie you guys. If you want to know more about the merkins and the penises or whatever you found interesting here and you want to know more about or you want us to cover more in depth in another episode, please comment down below. And if you're not subscribed, then what are you waiting for?
Do so now.
For each subscription, which kidnapped penis is going to be released from a nest.
Wings.
It's up to you guys.
I really hope you do an animation of penises with wings that are flying out of a box.
Now I'll have to do that.
So remember, for each subscription, a penis gets its wings.
A penis gets its wings.
And for each non-subscription, you lose your...
Anyway, basically, please subscribe. We would like that very much. We would know that you like what we're saying, even though it's interesting, moderately interesting, or rather not so much interestingly and phallically, penisally, and treasily. So,
okay.
Another way penises might get their wings is if you like this video. If in fact you did like it, just subscribe.
Even if you didn't, I mean, you never know. There are witches out there, guys. Yeah. I mean, you gotta keep this in mind.
One never knows. Maybe penises somewhere are missing wings.
Yeah, I mean, let's love each other, guys.
Down below, as we've proven in this episode, is all you need to know. And we'll see you guys next time in rather interesting,
but also not so much.
And until that moment in time,
have a good one.
Yes, indeed. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. Of course, he wasn't pluralizing octopus. The garden belonged to the octopus, so it's octopus apostrophe or
S.
octopus
so
apostrophe S.
So that would have been okay either
according
way.
to your affiliation.